This is quite possibly the most value for money smartphone ever made. For just $350 US, you'll be getting the first phone to be powered by the new Dimensity 1080 chipset, which drives its impressive 200 megapixel camera. An OLED display that supports a 120Hz refresh rate and 1920Hz pulse width modulation dimming. Not to mention, this is the first smartphone on the planet to bundle a 210 watt gallium nitride charger in its box and is actually able to receive 210 watt charging speeds, which can fully charge up this device in just 9 minutes. This is Tech Nick, and this is my extremely detailed full review of the Redmi Note 12 Discovery Edition. The Discovery Edition only comes in one variant, that being 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, and only one color variant, that being black. It is very boxy, it's a very classy looking design, though we do have curves on the back to aid with that. We have a 4,300 mAh battery split in two and very impressive 210 watt charging. The first phone with over 200 watt charging that is actually available to the public right now. This is the only phone you can pick up with 200 watt charging. I recently did a charging speed test. It can apparently charge full in 9 minutes. We got 9 minutes and 18 seconds, which is ridiculously impressive, getting a 1 to 100% mAh per minute reading of 458 and a maximum wattage of around 207 watts, which started at the start of the test. About 56 watts was the minimum at the end of the test to cool the phone down, and it got an average of about 110 watts throughout the test, which is actually ridiculously impressive since most 120 watt phones sit at around 60-70 watts throughout the test the whole time, and this didn't even get that hot. It kind of stayed on par with other 120 watt smartphones I've tested in the past. 9 minutes and 18 seconds and 100% full juice is just... Other than its crazy charging, we do have a Dimensity 1080 CPU, which is actually only slightly upgraded from the Dimensity 920. It has the same integrated graphics, that being the Mali G68. We also have LPDDR4 XRAM, only 8 gigs of it, UFS 2.2 storage. We have dual SIM 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and NFC as well. The phone is kitted with a glass back, though no protection specified, a glass front as well, and unfortunately only plastic frames to keep the cost down, since this is a very well-priced device. It is 207.5 grams in weight, so it's not the lightest guy around. It comes in at 8.98 millimeters thick, and get this, for such a budget-friendly smartphone, it actually has an IP53 dust and splash protection. Now, when it comes to the cameras, there are two very subpar, very mid-range cameras here. We have an 8 megapixel ultra-wide and a 2 megapixel macro camera, which are definitely not the star of the show, but they've managed to squeeze in a 200 megapixel budget Samsung ISOCELL camera into this guy, which is just ridiculously impressive at this price point. That 200 megapixel camera is no doubt the ISOCELL HPX sensor, and it does pack in OIS, but the Xiaomi 12T Pro uses a much better 200 megapixel ISOCELL HP1 sensor. But when comparing that 200 megapixel sensor side by side to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which cost a hell of a lot more, when you crop in, you can actually see the level of detail popping more on the Redmi Note 12 Discovery Edition, even though it is so much cheaper. The 8 megapixel ultra wide is okay. 200 megapixel main looks fantastic. You can bin down 4 to 1 pixel binning to 50 megapixels or 16 to 1 pixel binning, which I've never seen before, at 12.5 megapixels, still looks just as great. We can also get 200 megapixel lossless zoom at 2 times, 50 megapixel at 2 times digital zoom as well, and also 12.5 pixel binning for another 2 times zoom. We have 5 times zoom over here as well as 10 times zoom, and it does not look the best. That is the max zoom that we get. We can take a regular portrait shot over here, and putting portrait mode on, the edge detection is actually impressing me more than I would expect, and the macro camera actually does a better job than I thought that it would, though it's still a pretty pointless camera if you ask me. We can also record macro video. I'm not sure how many people out there actually record using the macro sensor, though we do have 1080p 30 fps ultra wide video. There's no 60 fps for the ultra wide or 4K for the ultra wide because the ultra wide camera is lacking quite a bit. We do have 1080p 60 fps main video, and while the actual camera sensor is capable of 4K 60, we're getting 4K 30 because of the chipset, that being the Dimensity 1080. It is a very budget chip, but 4K 30 still looks pretty decent, and stabilization is pretty decent too. Recording 4K 30 fps main video at night looks pretty okay. Stabilization is still okay. It's more than decent for a phone at this price point. And of course, we also have 1080p 30 fps ultra wide video, and recording at night, you can actually see how dark it is here. And I wanted to show you how dark it is here because when we switch over to night photos, it looks almost like daytime with night mode off on the ultra wide camera and night mode on. You can't really see much of a big difference with night mode off or on, but it looks like it's daytime here. Night mode on kind of controls the light a lot better and adds a little bit to the dynamic range, balancing out the shot a little bit, even at 2x zoom, as well as a 5x zoom, so on and so forth. A 10x zoom does not necessarily look the best, as you'll see right now. Even 5x at night doesn't look the best. When you start zooming in, it's better to keep night mode off instead of being on. And the cameras don't really disappoint me. Well, the camera doesn't really disappoint me. That being the 200 megapixel camera. The other two, they could have done a bit of a better job there, but then the price would have increased. So getting a phone for around $350 with a 200 megapixel camera is already asking for too much. On the right side of the device, we have a power button mixed up with a physical fingerprint sensor. We have a volume rocker above that. And at the bottom, we have a dual SIM 5G tray. No expandable storage, however, unlike its predecessor. And there is a water resistant seal because of that IP53 certification. We have a USB 2.0 Type-C port at the bottom, as well as a dual stereo speaker, one at the bottom, one at the top, paired with Dolby Atmos, and a 3.5mm headphone jack, as well as an IR blaster. At the top, we have a 16 megapixel selfie camera, which is unchanged from its predecessor. The selfie snaps come out okay. The lighting is kind of blown out. It doesn't really know how to take a portrait perfectly, but it does know how to do it in terms of great edge detection.
What's up, guys? This is Technic recording a 1080p 60 FPS selfie video on the brand new Redmi Note 12 Discovery Edition. Let me know your thoughts on the video and audio quality when recording with the selfie cam.
Of course, we can also record 1080p 60 FPS selfie video at night, though 1080p 30 FPS is more suited at night since it brightens things up. There's no night video mode on the back or front cams this time around. Taking a selfie at night looks okay. Night mode on once again looks okay, though it does dim it down a bit. It actually pops with more detail and controls the lighting a lot better. And you can use the portrait mode with flash mode on, which makes it nice and warm and colorful and vibrant, I guess you could say. The selfie camera is as good as the selfie camera would get at this price point. And deciding to power on the phone, we're going to be getting to the always on display, which is actually not an always on display since it turns off after 10 seconds and there's no way to keep it always on despite this being an OLED panel. We do have that side mounted physical fingerprint sensor and it works nice and snappy, very reliable, very quick, and we do have 2D face unlock which utilizes the selfie camera and it works as intended. As you can see, that stylish wallpaper coming through over there. I absolutely love the crystallization wallpapers. We do have a 6.67 inch OLED panel. It is Full HD Plus. There is no curves over here. It is a flat dot display and it does have 1 billion colors with 100% DCI-P3 color gamma rating. We do have HDR10 Plus as well as Dolby Vision. We have 900 nits of peak brightness and it does have 1920Hz PWM dimming, not to mention 120Hz refresh rates. And yes, you can use it in most apps. We'll get to games a little bit later, but as for now, in this app, it's using 120 natively, which is fantastic. It is fixed, no LTPO tech here, and we do have a 240Hz touch sampling rate, which is actually down from last year's 360Hz, but that's because of the new PWM dimming that we have. We do have MIUI 13 skinned over Android 12. Hopefully we get Android 13 skinned with MIUI 14 pretty soon, but it is pretty good, I guess you could say. It's not quite stock. It is the same MIUI experience that we've seen from the global version as well as the Chinese versions of the phone. We are kitted with Google services over here and there are tons of personalization options that you can tweak to make it in tune with your own personality. We do have 8 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM, which can be added by an additional 5 gigs of RAM, bringing it up to a total of 13 gigs of RAM. And we also have the new 6nm MediaTek Dimensity 1080 5G octa-core CPU. Though it hasn't really improved too much in terms of performance, it is mainly there to aid that new camera system, which is fantastic. And we do get a slight improvement in terms of performance and efficiency. Enabling performance mode and using the new chipset, we got a score on AnTuTu of 507,680 points, and switching over to Geekbench version 5, we got 746 single core score points and 1990 multi-core. And last but not least, we have 3D Mark Wildlife focusing on GPU performance here. Just using the 1440p rendered resolution wildlife test, we got 13.6 FPS. Now moving on to gaming, we do have an FPS counter in the developer options, and enabling that, I've only really seen this on Xiaomi devices in the past, so benchmarks weren't the best, but hopefully gaming will be a little bit better. Enabling game turbo over here and going into our first game, that being Genshin Impact, pulling the side tray open for game turbo and enabling performance mode, and making sure that we set to the highest possible graphics settings in Genshin Impact. We got an average of around 32 frames per second with a min of 16 and a max of 41. It's actually doing better than I would have expected for a phone at this price point. And while Genshin Impact is capped at 60 FPS, the next couple games I'm about to show you have no FPS cap, they have an unlimited cap, so we should be getting 120 FPS, but the phone is capping it at 60 no matter which game I've decided to throw at it, which really sucks. But while I show you those games as well as Genshin Impact over here, let's go ahead and test out those dual stereo speakers. The Redmi Note 12 Discovery Edition might not be the best phone for gaming or benchmarks. It might not have the best 200 megapixel camera sensor around, but you'd still be getting a device driven by a chipset that is more than capable to play games at reasonable settings and is actually able to take 200 megapixel photos at just $350. And the fact that Redmi have made a smartphone at such a low price point that boasts a very well-made glass build that comes packed in with an IP53 certification, not to mention a 6.67-inch 120Hz OLED display with 1920Hz PWM dimming, and most of all, packs in 210 watt charging, absolutely blows my mind. And if you want to get something even cheaper, you could always pick up the other variants of the phone, that being the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus, which is exactly the same. It just has a slightly bigger battery and slightly slower charging at 120 watts if charging is not your thing and you want your phone to last longer throughout the day. They might currently only be available in China, but if you can get your hands on one, trust me, you will not regret it at this price point. Let me know your thoughts on the new Redmi Note 12 series in the comment section down below. This is no doubt my pick for the dark horse smartphone of 2022. This is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.